How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Kaz and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing by far the most requested thing that I've gotten to do, and that is creating an external Imgui menu. Now, before we get into all of this, I'd like to say that if you enjoy this content and you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe. We are almost at 70 subscribers. That's going to be awesome. And if you need absolutely any help or you want to ask any questions, go ahead and join my Discord. We are happy to help you over there. Now, I have a little demo set up for you. This is what we're going to be making in this video. If I go ahead and run it, as you can see, we have this Imgui window. You can move it around, you can click on all the stuff and play around with it, and when you close it, it closes. So it's pretty cool. Now, before we get into all the code, we need to talk about what Imgui is and how it works. Imgui stands for Immediate Mode Graphical User Interface. What makes Imgui special is that it works in the immediate mode. This means that it is rebuilt and re-rendered every single frame. This makes Imgui extremely modular, extremely customizable, and very quick. Now, to get Imgui up and running, we're going to need to create a Windows window. We're then going to need to bind that to a DirectX 9 device, and after that we are going to use that to render our Imgui menu within the window. I know it might sound a little bit complicated, but hopefully the code will speak for itself. Now, another note is that this is going to be quite a lot of code, so if you want the source code, go ahead and join my Discord. I'm going to post the source code over there. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and open a brand new Visual Studio project. I'm going to make an empty project. I'm going to call it cheat menu, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. Alright, now that Visual Studio is open, the first thing we're going to do is come up to the top here and we're going to change from debug to release, and then next we're going to change from x64 to x86. Now we're going to need to change some solution properties, so right click on your solution, go to properties, and we're going to set the configuration type to application.exe, and we're going to set the C++ language standard to C++20. Go ahead and apply. Next we're going to come to the advanced tab and we're going to make sure that character set is set to use multi-byte character set. Go ahead and apply. Now we're going to come to linker, system, and we're going to change the subsystem from console to Windows. This is very important. And the last thing we're going to do is go to input, and we're going to need to add another library here. That's going to be d3d9.lib. Go ahead and hit OK and apply. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come to the top here and we're going to click this show all files button. Now in our solution we're going to create a folder called cheat, and then we're going to create a folder called Imgui. The cheat folder is going to hold all our source code. The Imgui folder is going to hold Imgui's code. Okay, it's just about time to go ahead and grab our Imgui code. To do that, we're going to come to the GitHub in the description below, and you're going to click on this green code button and you're going to click download zip. This is going to download the latest version of Imgui to your computer. As you can see in my downloads folder, I have imguimaster.zip. You're going to need to come and find your solution folder, and inside the Imgui folder, you're going to extract from imconfig.h all the way to imstbtruetype.h. Drop those inside your Imgui folder. Next, you're going to come into backends and you're going to grab the win32.h and win32.cpp. And the last thing you're going to do is scroll down and you're going to find the DirectX 9 backends. We're going to grab those and drop them in the folder too. Okay, that's all the source you need from Imgui. You can go ahead and close all this crap. Going back into our Visual Studio solution, come up here and click this refresh button. You can now see that we have all of the Imgui code. The last thing we need to do is right click on the Imgui folder and click include in project. This is going to include all the code inside your project. Now we're going to need to create 3 files. The first file we're going to create is going to be a source file, and that's going to be our main.cpp file. Next, we're going to create a gui.h file, and finally, we're going to create a gui.cpp file. gui.h and gui.cpp are going to hold the functions that we're going to use to create our GUI. So let's get started with that. You're going to come to gui.h, and the first thing we're going to do is include the DirectX 9 header. You can do that by typing include d3d9.h. Next, we're going to create a namespace called GUI. This namespace is going to hold all of our GUI related stuff. Now, the first thing we're going to do in this namespace is we're going to create constants to hold the window size. We can do that like so. These 2 variables are going to hold our window size. So if you want to change the window size at any point, come over here and change these 2 variables. Next, we're going to create a variable called exit. It's going to be a bool, and we're going to set that to true. This bool is going to basically hold the state of our window. So while exit is true, we're not going to exit. And when exit changes, we're then going to close down everything. Next, we're going to get our Windows API window vars, and we can do that like so. We're creating an H window called window, and we're creating window class exa called window class. This here is just our window information. We're going to use this to create our Win API window. Next, to handle window movement, we're going to create a variable called position. like so. Position is of type points, and this is going to store our window position for window movement. Last but not least, for our variables in our GUI namespace, we're going to hold the DirectX state variables. We can make them like so. Here's our device. We're also going to have present parameters, and we're going to have our pointer to direct3d9. Now, if you don't know what all this shit is, don't worry. I'll explain what it is when we get to it. For now, though, we need to make the prototypes for our functions that we're going to be using to make our GUI. The first two functions we're going to make are going to handle the creation and destruction of our window. We can do that like so. We're creating a function called gui.h window. It takes the name of the window and the class name of the window. And we're creating a function called destroy.h window. These are going to handle the creation and the destruction of our Windows API window. So these are going to be involved with these variables up here. Next, we're going to need to handle our device creation and destruction. We can do that like so. We have create device, reset device, and destroy device. Those are pretty self-explanatory. Next, we're going to handle the creation of ImGui and the destruction of ImGui. We can do that like so. Two simple functions, create ImGui and destroy ImGui. And finally, we're going to create our render functions. These are going to be called when we want to render the stuff that we have created. We can do that like so. We have a begin render, an end render, and a render function. Okay, that should be your gui.h setup. Now we're going to need to define all these functions. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and copy all of this. We're going to go into gui.cpp. We're going to include gui.h, first of all, and then we're going to paste this. Now we can remove all the comments, remove all the semicolons, and then we're going to add brackets. We're going to add the function bodies for each of these. Okay, I've added all the brackets. I'm going to go ahead and add the spaces between them just to make it look nice and to be consistent. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is you need to add the GUI namespace before all of these functions, like so. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in front of all of these functions. Now, before we get to filling in the bodies of all these functions, we're going to go ahead and include our ImGui files. Now, if you have the same project structure as me, you can include the 3 files that we need like so. Now, we're going to need to create our window process handler. The window process handler is essentially a function that handles all of the events that a Windows window makes. Now we need this because we need to send the events to ImGui so that ImGui can handle clicking and movement and things like that. So to get started with this, we are going to need to type out this line of code. This here is importing the ImGui implementation Win32 window proc handler in our code. You don't need to give a body for this. This is defined elsewhere in the ImGui Win32 file. But we are going to need to create our own window process handler, and we can do that like so. So over here we have this function called window process. It takes the window, message, and a while and long parameter. To close off this function, we're going to make it return a def win proc w. We can do that like so. Now, as I said, window process gets passed a message, and what we're going to do is we're going to check what the message is, and depending on what the message is, we're going to perform some functions. Now, because we're using ImGui and we have the ImGui window process handler over here, what we're going to do first of all is we're going to pass all of these parameters into ImGui's window proc handler. We can do that like so. So this is going to send all the window messages through ImGui's window process handler so that ImGui can receive them and act accordingly on them. But we're going to need to handle some window process messages by ourselves. So to do that, we're going to create a switch statement on the message. We can do that like so. Now, the first case we're going to make is going to be WM size. We can do that like so. The WM size message is called when we resize the window. Now, of course, our window is not resizable at the moment, but in the future, if you decide to make your window resizable, you're going to need this function in here anyway, so we are going to keep it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to disable the alt application menu. We can do that like so. We're going to switch on the WM syscommand message, and we're going to see if it's equal to SC key menu, and if it is, we're going to return 0, disabling the alt application menu. Next, we're going to handle the WM destroy message. This is when the GUI is supposed to be closed. We can do that like so. So if the WM destroy message is received, we're going to post quit message. This is going to close our window. Okay, so now we're going to get into the realm of handling our menu movement. The first message we're going to handle is going to be the WML button down. So this is when you click on the menu. We're going to handle this message like so. We're going to set our position to where we click. Now, the last message we're going to handle is by far the longest one, and that is going to be WM mouse move. Remember, we've already clicked. Now we're going to start moving our mouse, and we're going to need to perform some logic to calculate where our menu is going to be moved to. We can do that like so. Okay, this is quite a large event that we're handling over here, but if the white parameter is equal to all buttons, so once again, if we're pressing down our left button, we're going to make points where we've clicked We're going to create a rect, which is going to be the size of our window. We're then going to calculate where our mouse was relative to the window. And then we do some random shit here. And then we are going to set the window position to where we are moving it to. Now, this is by far the most advanced and annoying part of this whole tutorial. The rest will be a lot more simple. But just remember, this is the window process. It handles all the events that Windows sends to your window. Anyway, with that out the way, we can move on to creating our H window. This function is going to do a few things. First of all, we're going to create a window class, which is essentially a description of our window. We're then going to register the class. Now, using the registered class, we're going to call the createWindowA function, which is going to make our window and populate our H window. And finally, we're going to call showWindow and updateWindow. So to create our window class, we're going to do that like so. Remember, we've already created a window class variable inside of our GUI namespace. So now we're just going to populate it with all the information we need. The important things here are we are setting the window process to our window process function so that Windows knows which window process to call. And we are setting the class name over here to the class name that we pass into the create window function. Once you have all of this, we can go ahead and register the window class. We can do that like so. We're going to call register class exa, and we're going to pass in our window class address. Now we can go ahead and create the window. We can do that like so. Remember, we already have a variable named window. We're going to call createWindowA, which is a Windows API function. We're going to pass in the name of our window class. We're going to pass in the name of our window. And this is very important. We're setting the window type to a WS pop-up. These two integers are going to be where the window begins. So 100 is going to be around this point in our screen. And we're passing in the window width and the window height, those constants that we made in the beginning. Once the window is created, we're going to go ahead and call showWindow and updateWindow. We can do that like so. Window, of course, is going to show our window, and update window is also self-explanatory. It's going to update our window. And that completes our create H window function. Now we can move on to destroy H window. To destroy the window, we're going to call destroy window and pass in our H window. And we're also going to need to unregister the window class. And we can do that like so. Two simple functions. We're going to pass in H window into destroy window. These are WinAPI functions. And then we're going to call unregister class. We're going to pass in the instance and the class name. And that concludes our H window functions. Now we can move on to creating, resetting, and destroying our DirectX 9 device. Creation of a DirectX 9 device is going to go as follows. First of all, we're going to call direct 3D create 9, and we're going to check if it's true. We can do that like so. Remember, we already have a variable called d3d in our GUI namespace. We're going to call direct 3D create 9, and if d3d is unsuccessfully created, we're going to return false. Next, we're going to call zero memory, which is a Windows API function, which is going to create space for our present parameters. We can do that like so. Next, we're going to set our present parameters, and we can do that like so. Once we have our present parameters set, we can go ahead and create our device, and we're going to do that like so. We're creating our device in this if statement. We're using a d3d, which we created up here. We're calling create device, and we're going to put the device into our device variable over here. We're going to use the present parameters that we set up above, and this is within an if statement. So if this function returns a return value less than 0, we're going to return false, which means that it failed. But if it doesn't, we're going to return true. And that concludes our create device function. Next, we're going to set up our reset device. This is going to be as follows. This is going to be used whenever the window is resized or whenever an update needs to be called. We're going to do this by resetting the device, checking if the result is valid. And we're also going to need to call these two ImGui functions, which are going to invalidate and recreate the device objects. Moving on to destroy device. This is pretty simple. Just two if statements. If device, of course, is valid, we're going to release it, and then we're going to set it to a null pointer. And if d3d is valid, we're going to release it and set it to a null pointer. Now we can move on to our create ImGui function. This is going to initialize the ImGui context so that we can start using ImGui. That's going to be done like so. Since I'm trying to keep this tutorial simple, we're just going to use the standard ImGui style colors dark. We're going to call ImGui check version. We're going to create our context. We're going to set the file name to 0 so that it doesn't make a imgui.ini config file where you run it. And the most important thing here is we are initializing ImGui Win32 and ImGui DirectX 9, passing in our window and our device that we have just created. Now to destroy the ImGui window, it's also pretty simple. It's 3 lines. We can do that like so. We're going to shut down ImGui DirectX 9. We're going to shut down the ImGui Win32 context, and then we're going to destroy the ImGui context as a whole. Okay, that just about wraps up all of our creation and destruction logic all above here. Now we can move on to our rendering logic. The first first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our begin render function. This is going to get the Windows message, it's going to pass it to our window proc handler, and it's going to create new ImGui frames. We can do that like so. We do this by creating a temporary variable called message of type MSG. While peak message, blah, 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 we're going to translate the message and dispatch the message. This is going to dispatch the message to our window process handler that we set up earlier, and our window process handler is going to go ahead and handle all the messages. The most important thing here though is we're going to create a new DirectX 9 ImGui frame. We're going to create a new Win32 frame, and then we're going to create a new ImGui frame. ImGui render is going to handle a lot more DirectX stuff. This is going to begin the scene, it's going to end the scene, and it's going to present the scene. We can do that like so. The first thing we're going to do is call ImGui end frame. Remember we called new frame up here. Whenever new frame is called, end frame has to be called. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our device's render state. We can do that like so. We're going to call device, set render state, and we're going to use these flags. Next, we need to clear our DirectX buffer. We can do that like so by using device clear. Next, we're going to begin and end our DirectX scene. We can do that like so. We're going to call DirectX begin scene. If that succeeds, we're going to call ImGui render and render draw data. This is going to render our ImGui data. And if that all succeeds, we are going to call device end scene. The last thing we need to do is actually call present. We can do that like so. We're going to store the result of our present function in a local variable called result. This is so that we can check if it succeeds or not. To check if it succeeds or not, we're going to use our local result variable to check if the device was lost or if it hasn't been reset. And if it hasn't, we're going to reset the device. All right, and we are nearing the end of our GUI file over here. The last thing we're going to do is set up the GUI render function that we made. This is going to hold what we are going to render. I'm going to create an ImGui window using ImGui begin. Very important here, we're setting the next window size to our constant width and height. This is so that you cannot see the background DirectX window. We're also setting the window position to 0, 0. This means that the ImGui window is going to take up the full space of the Windows window that we created. Now every ImGui begin needs an ImGui end, so let's go ahead and add that. I'm then going to go ahead and add a example ImGui button over here. We can do that like so. We're going to use ImGui button. We're going to pass in the name, which is going to be subscribe, and this is going to show a button in our menu, which is called subscribe to Kazi, which you should do, by the way. Now also note that we passed in our exit variable into begin. This is so that when we click the X in the top right, it's actually going to change exit to false, which is going to break us out of our loop, which is going to end our program. Okay, and that just about concludes our GUI namespace. If you did this all correctly, these functions are going to allow you to create the window, create the device, create the ImGui context. We're then going to use these functions down here to render our ImGui menu, and when we want to exit out of the program, we're going to use the destroy functions to cleanly unload all the resources that we were using. So with all of that out the way, we can move on to our main.cpp file. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and include our gui.h. We can do that like so. Once GUI is included, we're going to create our entry point. Now, because we're using the Windows subsystem, it's going to look a little bit different because we're going to be using winmain, but we can do that like so. Winmain takes 4 parameters. If you don't know what winmain is, go ahead and search it up. It's just the default Windows entry point. And if everything goes good and well, we're going to return exit success, which is just 0. Now, the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and create our GUI. We can do that like so. Remember, all the messy, boring logic is handled by our ImGui namespace and these functions. All you need to do is call them in the right order. So we're going to go ahead and create the GUI. The first thing we're going to do is create our window. We're going to pass in the window name and the window class name. Next, we're going to use the window that was created to create our device. And last but not least, we're going to create our ImGui context, set up the styles and everything like that. Now we can go ahead and create our render loop. We can do that like so. We're going to use while GUI exit. Remember, while GUI exit will be true, so this while loop is going to run forever. But when we click the X button on our ImGui menu, it's going to set this to false, and that's going to break us out of this loop. Now, as per usual, this loop is going to run like a billion fucking times per second, which is just unnecessary. So we're going to come up to the top here and include the thread header. Once the thread header has been included, we're going to go ahead and sleep this while loop using std this thread sleep for, and we're going to sleep it for 10 milliseconds. Now, within this loop, we're going to use our render functions. We can use our render functions like so. Call begin render, then call render, then call end render. Remember, render holds all of the stuff that we want to render. Begin render handles the window messages. End render does all the DirectX stuff and ImGui stuff to actually present the scene onto our screen. Last but not least, when we close the GUI, we want to release all the resources correctly so that we aren't creating any memory leaks or doing anything stupid, and we can do that like so. We're going to call these in the reverse order that we created them. So the last thing created was imgui. The first thing destroyed is going to be imgui. Then we're going to destroy our device, and then we're going to destroy our handle to our window. Now, if you did everything correctly, we can go ahead and build this. Remember, release x86. Over here in my cheat menu folder, going into release, as we can see, we have a whole bunch of crap. Who cares about that? We're going to go ahead and run cheatmenu.exe. And as we can see, our menu pops up. Everything works, we can move it, we can click on things, and if we click the X button, it closes the window. Now, I'm probably going to do a video in the future about all of the ImGui widgets, so creating buttons, creating checkboxes, everything like that. But this video is long enough, so if you want to know about those, go into your ImGui folder and go into imguidemo.cpp. This folder holds a lot of documented information on how to use every single widget in ImGui. So with all of that out the way, I hope that you got a working menu. Remember, if you want the source code to this, go ahead and join my Discord server down below. If you enjoy this content and would like to see more, feel free to drop a like and definitely subscribe because I'm not going anywhere. Anyway, till next time, I'll see you guys. Cheers.